being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes along with Albie Ammon-Corner, Emily Carver, Benjamin Butterworth and Leo Kearse. Tonight on the show I'm going to be talking to you about Phillip Schofield doing a runner.
Why we should let asylum seekers work instead of making taxpayers foot their bills.
Why supporting the family is not far right.
And why we should be building on the greenbelt no matter what the boomers say.
And I'm going to be talking about why systemic racism does exist and it's anti-white.
It's going to be one hell of a show. It's 8 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5, the best Saturday night takeaway you could order. Expect fiery debates, spicy opinions and a huge topping of fun. Every week, join Albie, Emily, Benjamin and myself, along with a guest star. Tonight, it's the one and only Leo Kearse.
Now, the premise of the show is very simple. Each host gets to outline their argument about their chosen topic. Then we all pile in and the first starts to fly. Of course, we want to know your views as well. Please do get in touch by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk. But before we start tearing each other apart, it is your Saturday Night News with Ray Addison.
Thanks to all 5 of you. Here's the latest. Phillip Schofield says he's agreed to step down from ITV's flagship daytime show this morning with immediate effect. ITV has confirmed that he won't be returning despite 2 decades at the helm, with last Thursday's show being his final episode. Co-host Holly Willoughby says she won't be leaving. She's responded by saying that the sofa won't feel the same without him. Mr. Schofield posted on social media saying he wanted to protect the programme he loved. It's after his brother, Timothy Schofield, was jailed for 12 years after being convicted of child sex offences. World leaders have welcomed Ukraine's president to the G7 summit in Japan.
Good to see you. How are you? Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Bye, guys.
Volodymyr Zelensky met with the UK's Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who said the invite demonstrated the international community's steadfast support for Ukraine against Russian aggression. French President Emmanuel Macron described his presence as a game changer towards peace. Well, it's as the White House approved plans to provide F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine and to train its pilots. President Zelensky has repeatedly lobbied Western allies for air support and hailed the move as historic, saying it will greatly enhance Ukraine's army in the sky. The plans are expected to be rolled out in the coming weeks and months, but Russia says it carries colossal risks for the West. Well, Labour is calling on the Prime Minister to investigate following claims that the Home Secretary asked civil servants to help her avoid getting speeding points on her licence. According to the Sunday Times, Suella Braverman asked Home Office aides to organise a one-to-one driving awareness course after she was caught speeding last summer. When they refused, she reportedly asked a political aide to help, but ultimately decided to accept the points. A source close to Mrs Braverman says the speeding ticket and arrangements for dealing with it were reported to the Cabinet Office at the time. Well, counting is continuing in the local elections in Northern Ireland, with less than 20 seats left to declare. Sinn Féin has made strong gains and is on course to become the largest party in local government, with 139 councillors so far. The DUP currently has 118 and the Alliance Party 65. It's the first electoral test for the parties since last year's Assembly elections. It also takes place against the backdrop of the Stormont stalemate. And a suspect has now been arrested after scaling the front of the BBC building in central London in protest against a historic statue. Earlier on, the man had been seen hammering at the Prospero and Ariel statue, which has been on display since 1933. Shortly after 6 p.m, he was arrested on suspicion of criminal damage and going equipped. Campaigners have been calling for the statue's removal as its sculptor, Eric Gill, admitted in his diaries that he had sexually abused his daughters. We're on TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Back now to the Saturday 5.
Yes, it's Saturday night and you are with the Saturday 5. I'm Emily Carver and I can promise you that you are in for a very lively hour. So let's crack on with tonight's first debate. Now then, Darren is going to give us his hot take on Phillip Schofield's departure from ITV's This Morning. This is breaking news, so off you go, Darren.
Yes, well, that's it, folks. The one-time king of daytime telly has lost his crown. Phillip Schofield's out at This Morning, and presumably ITV's Dancing on Ice too. He'll join Gordon the Gopher in TV retirement. The bombshell announcement comes just one day after his brother Timothy Schofield was sentenced to 12 years in prison for 11 counts of child sex offences. Schofield announced he was stepping down from ITV's This Morning after more than 20 years in a statement that said, "Throughout my career in TV, including the very difficult last few days, I've always done my best to be honourable and kind. I understand that ITV has decided the current situation can't go on and I want to do what I can to protect the show that I love. So I have agreed to step down from This Morning with immediate effect in the hope that the show can move forward to a bright future. I'd like to thank everyone who has supported me, especially This Morning's amazing viewers, and I'll see you all for the Soap Awards next month." Now, of course, Schofield and Willoughby were said to be the best of friends, inseparable. But in recent weeks, their on-screen chemistry has looked about as comfortable as a Jeremy Paxman interview. It's been frostier than a pack of Frosties in a freezer. It's been as tortured as a trip to the Guantanamo Bay. There was more animation from a robot that they had on the show last week than this TV duo. You see, Schofield, folks, is so bad that even the lovies didn't stand by him. No one came out to support him. No one has defended him. Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, standing in for Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's Questions this week, described Sir Keir Starmer and his Deputy Angela Rayner as the Phil and Holly of British politics. All lovey-dovey on the surface, they turn it on for the cameras, but as soon as they're off, it's a different story. They're at each other's throats. Brutal, but pretty accurate. So why is it taking Schofield so long, you might ask? Word has it that some at ITV are especially jubilant about Schofield's departure. If you ask me, he's put Holly Willoughby through an awkward psychodrama that was clearly untenable and impossible to defend. Schofield and his on-screen wife faced criticism in September last year over claims that they skipped the queue for our late Queen's lying in state while attending as media members to film a segment for This Morning. So what on earth was Willoughby meant to say when it was revealed that Phillip Schofield's brother told the TV host of sexual acts with a child? In my view, this was all inevitable. ITV had to part ways with their silver sofa star and call it quits after viewing figures began to tank. But let's see what the panel think. Is this the end of the story? Is there more to come out? Will we ever know? And will ITV staffers be keeping quiet? Let me know what you think as well. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Benjamin, you were quite a fan of Phillip Schofield. Do you think this is going to harm his reputation?
Well, look, I think having to leave your flagship programme of over 20 years clearly isn't going to be great news. And if you read out the statement, you know, it doesn't say, I decided to end it, I decided to move on. It says, they said it couldn't go along. So clearly he has been pushed out, not chosen to go. But look, when he came out as gay, maybe 2 years ago now, on that sofa, I thought that was a really powerful moment. You know, we sometimes forget, and it's a slightly different topic, but there were a lot of people in this country who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, who've never told anyone they're gay, and I thought he was a great bastion for that. And I'm sorry, but I think there's a level of homophobia in the vengeance shown towards him, in the vitriol shown towards Phillip Schofield.
Emily, do you accept that? Do you think it's laced with homophobia, the criticism and...
Well, no. I mean, I'm racking my mind now to think back to when he announced that he was gay on television, because I remember at the time thinking of his poor wife.
He got married to her in 1993. He was with her for all that time.
I felt, you know, it's pretty harsh to find out that your husband has been living a double life or has had these feelings for all of these many years. You don't just wake up one day and become gay. Yes, of course, it can be a struggle to come out, but many people in the media and in showbiz have come out. There are many openly homosexual people in the media and showbiz. I mean, let's look at our panel right here. I mean, you know, it's hard. It's
Leo,
hardly.
you're about to come out.
No, but it's hardly groundbreaking to come out as gay anymore. It simply isn't.
Wait till my wife hears this.
Yeah, that's a great point. Even in the 90s, you know, fair enough. You could say that somebody in the 50s, 60s, 70s might, you know, marry a woman to cover up their gayness or whatever. But I mean, it was 1993. It wasn't a particularly homophobic time. In Britain, a hugely liberal
time in 1993.
No, you weren't even born then.
No, I wasn't born. You're absolutely right. But I have read the history books, Leo, and especially the gay history books. They talk about a lot of the homophobia that was going on in the 80s and 90s. And of course, if it wasn't a homophobic time, Phillip Schofield probably would have come out then. So I don't think we can be saying
no, I think that's nonsense.
It wasn't a homophobic time.
There are loads of high-profile gay celebrities.
Many of them almost have their careers.
Do you accept Benjamin's point that actually a lot of the criticism and attention around Phillip Schofield in particular, especially with this current, you know, controversy that's going on in the background, is actually laced in homophobia?
No, not at all. And I think actually this could be a great career booster for Phillip, because I know the BBC are looking for somebody to present Top of the Pops.
Yes, well,
I used to love that programme.
I have to be honest. You know, you're Leo Clueless, right? If you think
Leo Clueless.
If you
what
think...
sort of an attempt at a nickname is that, Benjamin Butterworth?
I
mean, you're literally named as a nickname, and you're trying to give me one.
Right. The truth is, I think that's complete nonsense. You know, in the 1990s, it was illegal to be gay and work in the civil service. It was illegal to be gay and work in the armed forces. You know, even George Michael hadn't come out in 1993, mate. So
I think everybody
on TV, and it turned out that his wife had been obviously.
And we've all said,
it's sad.
well, there's
it's not
a surprise.
Something to celebrate. It's quite sad, the situation for their family.
But anyway, folks, up next it's Albie, and he's going to talk about why asylum seekers who come to the UK should work and pay their own way. Here we go. Albie?
So, some people might find this controversial, but they really shouldn't. We should be letting asylum seekers work whilst their claims are being processed. We've got 1.1 million vacancies in the United Kingdom as of today. We've got many jobs that Brits simply won't do. Many of these migrants are working illegally anyway, or they're being driven to crime. Why don't we just make the most of a bad situation? Let them plug our employment gaps so that we're not suffering from job losses in some area, and also allow the migrants to earn their own keep so that they're not reliant on the taxpayer. We pay £2.1 billion a year, housing them in hotels and giving them takeaways. Why not let them work so they can pay their own way, so it reduces the burden on the taxpayer and also plugs our employment gaps? And besides, as I mentioned, many of them are working illegally anyway. So, Emily, you're a low-tax, small-state Conservative who believes people should be self-reliant. Why is it that we're not allowing these asylum seekers to be self-reliant when they're here?
Well, because I don't believe that they would be self-reliant, firstly. I think your strongest argument is that a lot of them are already working illegally. I think that's true. Mark White, our Home Affairs editor here at GBNews, did a piece on that, a report on that earlier, and many people who are staying in hotels are also working in things like car washes and other small businesses where they're able to get away with it without having a visa to work. But I think there's a strong argument to say that this would be a massive pull factor.
Yeah.
If anyone can simply hop onto a dinghy, come over to this country and be allowed to work, then that makes an absolute joke of our visa system.
But at the moment...
Why would you even bother?
At the moment, they're hopping onto a dinghy and they're having all of their bills paid for, they're having food paid for, they're getting takeaways, they're staying in hotels. So is that not already a pull factor? And all this would do is mean that they're paying their own way, so it's less of a burden on the taxpayer.
But why would you even bother applying for a visa if it was the case that if you arrived illegally, you'd be put up in accommodation and then also be allowed to work, and presumably also have access to the NHS, to benefit system, because a lot of these jobs wouldn't be enough to be able to afford.
But they already
housing,
have all of that.
board,
They already have all of that anyway. Benjamin, would it be cruel to allow these asylum seekers to work in the UK for the 2 years that it takes for their claims to be processed, integrate into society, and then if they're denied, send them to Rwanda or back to their country of origin?
Well, I think it's absolutely essential that they work in this country. We have an economy for which sectors like healthcare, like care homes, like parts of hospitality, where it is on its knees because there are not people to do the jobs. Look at fruit picking as another example, where the ability to make a profit in that industry has gone through the floor because the immigrants aren't coming over here.
So you just want asylum seekers to work on the fruit fields?
Well, yeah, I do
thought some of them
actually,
were doctors, engineers, master engineers,
but they can't work as any of those things. And what I think is that they should have the right to work so that they can contribute to our society, so that they're not a drain on public funds, so that they're invested. And you know what? Some of these countries like the Yemen or Afghanistan, 80–90% of them will be accepted. And yet what we're saying right now is we're going to pay you 50 quid a week, which is an incredibly small amount of money in the first place, but we're going to pay you 50 quid a week for 2 years and spend thousands of pounds on legal fees, and you can't do anything useful for us. How is that the best answer?
How the left have changed. Now, the left used to be about protecting working-class jobs. Now they want untapped, low-wage jobs market where unlimited labour can flood across the channel.
I don't think that's
take the
what
jobs
Benjamin
and
was
press
saying.
wages down for working
You
men
clearly don't
and women.
believe in borders, Albie and Benjamin. Because
What
if you
a
think there's someone who
nonsense.
gets on
What a
a
nonsense.
boat, arrives in this country and immediately has access to the labour market.
But Emily,
what an absolute joke
they're
that makes
working
our
illegally
immigration
anyway. As you
system.
mentioned, they're working illegally
Hopefully not
anyway.
all of them
Well,
are.
many of them are.
And
we
this
had
is something that the
reporting that
government
many
needs
of them
to
were working
clamp
illegally.
down on. I'm sorry, it makes an absolute joke of our asylum system. It would make an absolute joke of our visa system. I understand your economic argument, but I think it is weak because these people would mostly be working in very menial jobs, and it wouldn't be enough to support their accommodation. It wouldn't be enough to make up for the amount that's spent on the NHS, children's schooling, etc.
£2.1 billion a year on hotels and takeaways for migrants. Why is it a bad thing to let them work so they can pay their own?
Do you know what, Albie? I find it extraordinary that you're speaking up for those who are working illegally in car washes and all those other kinds of jobs, when actually you're not speaking about the 5 million people in Britain who are out of work.
That is a separate issue.
How is it a separate issue?
You
would bring in more labour that competes against the working people of Britain.
These people are already here, Darren. These people are already here. I'm saying let's make the most of a bad situation. There are jobs that Brits won't do. They're a drain on the state.
What you are proposing,
let's let them work and pay their own way.
What you are proposing would bring in a hell of a lot more people. I am answering your question.
Why is that bad?
If you would stop being so rude, I will answer your question.
Please.
If you incentivise people to come here in overwhelming numbers, how on earth is that not going to compete with the domestic labour market here at home?
These people.
Why do you not care about the British people?
These people are already here.
Why do you not care about the British people?
I think you're making a pretty ridiculous statement that I don't care about.
No, that's a really valid point.
Answer the question. Answer the question.
I'm answering the question. This discussion is about migrants who are currently a net drain on the state. There are jobs, as I mentioned before, that British people simply won't do. Suella Braverman spoke about it at the National Conservatism Conference, of which you were at.
But Albie, don't you think the
So
emphasis
why
should
don't we
be
let
on...
them plug the jobs that Brits won't do?
No, but don't you think the emphasis should be on our failing asylum system and the fact that asylum claims are taking so long to be processed before you just give it a carte blanche to anyone who crosses over the channel illegally
that's not the argument that we're having today.
It's absolute rubbish. It's
That's
nonsense.
not the argument we're having
it's
today.
ideological.
And especially when a million people
are
rumoured to
none of you have
here.
answered my question.
But
why it's bad to let them pay their own way.
Coming here, it's obscene.
Can I just pick up this claim that somehow they're flooding in because they want the small benefits that are offered to them here? The push factors are much stronger than the pull factors to this country.
From Albania?
It's the fact that we have climate change destroying parts of the world where millions live.
Climate
like
change is
Bangladesh.
destroying Albania.
It's the fact that we have serious problems with terrorism in parts of the world that
There's
isn't
terrorism
going
in
away.
Albania.
And that's why they're coming here.
It looks like we're not going to agree on this one. Sadly, we're going to have to move on.
I
Maybe
won't be
we'll come back
lectured
to
by
that on
Leo
a future
Terrace.
episode. Still to come tonight. Let us know what you think at home. I'll be giving my 2 cents on why backing the family as a unit is not far right. Benjamin will call for more houses on the greenbelt, despite what the boomers say. His words, not mine. But next, Leo Kearse argues that Britain is systemically racist against white people. Sparks are going to fly, I think, on that one. You're at Saturday 5, live on GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. As always, cheers very much for all of your emails about tonight's topics. Christian's written in to say Phillip Schofield has been on borrowed time for years. Never forget the pain his wife went through, having found out in a very public way that she'd been living a lie for decades. Phillip's position is untenable. Poor Holly deserves better. Janice says, there is no way I would allow an illegals to look after anyone in our care system. Don't know who they are or where they're from, and do they have a criminal record? It's a ridiculous idea. Well, spicy stuff. Now, it's time for our next debate. Up next, it's Leo, who is going to tell us why he thinks systemic racism does exist. And guess what, folks? It's anti-white racism. Take it away, Leo.
We're told that systemic racism is one of the evils of our time. So I went looking for it, and I found it in not 1 but 2 job adverts for government jobs. One was for 2 teachers in Scotland. The other one was for TfL, Sadiq Khan's TfL. Both of them specified candidates and excluded candidates based on the colour of their skin. The twist, they were excluding white candidates and only selecting candidates that were BAME or BIPOC or whatever the appropriate acronym is this week. Now, this is terrible. We cannot have racist job adverts. We can't have this baked into the functioning of our government and of our corporations. There are many reasons that it's a terrible idea. It reduces the pool of talent that you can choose from. Scotland is 96% white, so you're only selecting from 4% of Scotland's population. It stirs up resentment. Anybody like me who sees that advert is going to feel slighted. I can't apply just because I'm white. That's terrible. That's racist. And for some people, that's going to encourage them to be racist in retaliation. We do not want to encourage this at all. And it also invalidates the achievements of the people who do get those jobs. Everybody's going to look at them and say, well, you just got this job because of the colour of your skin, not because of what you've actually achieved with your life. It's terrible. I don't know. Under the Equality Act, it should be illegal to discriminate based on the colour of someone's skin. But apparently there are carve-outs where, in this case, for the teachers, they said they needed somebody who matched the ethnicity and the cultural background of the pupils that they were teaching. But again, that's racial segregation. That's a very dangerous racist idea to say that white people can't teach black kids, black people can't teach white kids. That's exactly what the Nazis were saying. It's disgusting. Anyway, I have a dream. I have a dream that one day we'll have equality in this country and everybody will be treated equally, no matter what the colour of their skin, and anti-white racism will be a thing of the past.
Well, I mean, there we are.
Oh, Leo, I mean, that was a very, very interesting monologue that you just gave us there. So your claim is that systemic racism exists against white people, so there's anti-white racism.
Yeah, and I just gave 2 examples.
And the evidence that you have given are 2 job adverts. Do you have any other evidence to back up your claim?
Do I need any other evidence?
Yes,
would you say that to somebody? Would you say that to somebody who's just been the victim of racism? Would you say, oh, but what other racism?
Yes, I would.
This isn't
actually.
enough racism.
Yes, I would.
You would.
I would ask for some more statistics to back up a claim, like saying that systemic racism exists, but it's anti-white.
All right.
So what other evidence do you have?
Why don't you turn on ITV and wait for an ad break? And then see what the representation is in the adverts. See if it's, I mean, Britain is 86% white. See if 86% of the people in those adverts are white.
Is that meant to be evidence?
How much evidence do you need, Albie? I mean, it's supposed to be a 1-minute monologue.
Oh, well, no, that's fine. I'm just asking. We're having a discussion now, and you're not really giving very good evidence.
Can you just check your black privilege, please?
No, I won't, actually, because I'm wearing my black privilege on my sleeve here. I'm even wearing a black shirt to just prove it even more. Look, there are systemic injustices in society, and there are some people who argue that there is systemic racism against people of colour. Some people who argue that there's systemic racism against white people. I have to say, you're the first person I've heard make that argument seriously.
Because everybody's too scared to.
But when people talk about systemic racism towards black people or Asian people, they use proper statistics from the Office of National Statistics, such as the statistics about healthcare outcomes. If we look, for example, about women giving birth, we know that black and Asian women are 3 or 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women.
And that's because of racism. Are you saying birth canals are racist against people?
Leo, I'm actually trying to make a serious point, but you're not willing to engage with it.
No, but that's not an example. That's not an example of systemic racism.
You gave 2 job adverts.
There's no evidence showing that.
Hang on. May I come in here because I'm not sure we're getting anywhere with this particular line. Let's focus on these adverts themselves.
Yeah.
I think you can reasonably argue that it is discriminatory against white people if they are not allowed to apply for a government job.
Yes, I have a lot of sympathy for that, but what I disagree with vehemently is that those 2 job adverts are evidence that there's systemic racism against white people in Britain. I mean, come on.
I'm
not saying there is or there isn't.
That was Leah's argument.
In that department, that government department, TfL, would you say that their recruitment process could be argued to be racist?
There's no argument there. That is discriminatory.
It comes down to
and they
government.
Should not be doing
it comes down to government policy as well. So under the Equality Act, job adverts, these government departments are allowed to post racist job adverts.
They should not be posting those job adverts in that way.
Thank you for agreeing with me.
Your argument was that there's anti-white racism and it's systemic.
Well, Benjamin,
you gave 2 pieces of rubbish evidence.
We'll bring that back on screen, this advert from TfL, where actually it says that you must be of black, Asian and minority ethnic background. Do you think that's actually OK as a job application or job?
Yeah, absolutely. Positive discrimination, which is what this is.
What's positive about it?
Is important because you have institutional barriers that apply to groups like black and minority ethnic people. You have.
Could you give me an example of one of these barriers?
Well, we know, for example, you see the evidence that if someone with a non-traditional British-sounding name puts their name on a CV, that they are far less likely to be considered. There's swathes of evidence around that.
Well, not at TfL.
That's why blind CVs, ones that don't have the name, is more important.
So you think racism should be fought with more racism?
What I think is that there are. Well, you're just full of nonsense. Really,
no, that's exactly exactly what this is. This is racism.
Well, there's a reason they call you Leo Crass. There's
Nobody calls me Leo Crass. You're literally called Benjamin Butterworth, and you're criticising other people's names.
The fact is that there is institutional racism that means that white people appoint other white people, that they associate white people with certain skills and accomplishments and confidence and expectations, that they see a black person, they see people from some other minority ethnic groups, and they make different assumptions.
So you think this?
That is institutional
racism is okay? You think
this is a way that says to people from those backgrounds they can get a foot on the ladder that they wouldn't otherwise.
Benjamin, when do you stop doing that? Because if you look at the person who's running TfL, it is Sadiq Khan, who himself is an ethnic minority.
He's been held back, hasn't he?
He's managed to become...
Well, hang on.
So when do you stop it? When there's completely equal representation?
Well, you just said, hang on, you just said you used Sadiq Khan as an example of not facing barriers. Sadiq Khan, quite uniquely, faces the same police protection, which he doesn't get a choice in, as the Prime Minister and the King, because he faces so many racist
I'm asking you
threats.
when positive discrimination should finish. When is the job done?
Well, the job would be done when you see the evidence that someone with Albi's surname doesn't face the same assumptions as your surname.
What about Rishi Sunak, literally the Prime Minister?
Oh, that's fair.
But Rishi Sunak had, and I'm not denying that he's overcome barriers, but he had the most extraordinary privilege of going to one of the most expensive schools in Britain and being married to a billionaire.
But you said that we need to have institutionalised racism in job selection and candidate selection to combat
use those words.
the racism that holds back Rishi Sunak, who somehow managed to become Prime Minister despite it being impossible for somebody...
What you don't understand, Leo, is institutional racism.
Right, well, Benjamin...
You give anecdotes, not evidence.
Let's just say,
for
example...
It's the literal Prime Minister.
Let's just say, for example, right, there are too many gays in showbiz, perhaps. Would you actually support a job application for, I don't know, a new TV presenter or something like that, saying no gays allowed?
Well, actually, I think stuff like that is really important because television is meant to reflect the country, and that's why the fact that, you know, roll back...
But Leo's just told
20
you
years
about
ago,
ITV adverts. There's no white people.
Roll back 20 or 30 years and you would have had a much harder chance as an Indian person or a black person getting on telly because racist views are more commonplace. Roll back 50 years and white people dressed up as minstrels to mock black people on Saturday night. Well, that's what you're trying to overcome.
We're trying to overcome something that happened.
White racism.
We're trying to overcome something that happened 50 years ago. Your example of racism is the minstrels.
Yeah, well, that was
This is a particularly fiery session,
It is, actually.
this one, Darren.
Row still ahead, folks. Benjamin gets het up over the lack of house building on our precious greenbelt. But straight up next, there's going to be a case by Emily made for why backing families doesn't mean you're far right. Yes, that really is the ridiculous argument that's been made this week. But you are with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts of
Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to an incredibly fiery, I think it's safe to say, Saturday 5. As always, cheers very much for all of your emails about tonight's topics. Maggie's written in and she says positive racism to one person is negative racism to another. It is all evil.
Quite right.
Food for thought. Now it's time for our next debate. Up next, it's going to be Emily. And Emily's going to tell us why supporting the family institution doesn't mean that you're far right. Off you go, Emily.
Yes, well, there you go. So, Danny Kruger MP was torn to shreds this week after he suggested at a Conservative conference that parents should stay together for the sake of the family and that the normative family, i.e. a family consisting of two parents, is the only basis for a safe and functioning society. So, let's have a look at what he had to say and you can judge.
A normative family, held together by marriage, by mother and father sticking together for the sake of the children and the sake of their own parents and the sake of themselves. This is the only possible basis for a safe and successful society.
So, there you go. According to Twitter, that was the most controversial, outrageous, far-right, bigoted thing that one could ever say. People pointed out that people suffer in abusive marriages and can be victims of domestic violence. Therefore, how dare Danny Kruger even suggest that people should stay together in partnerships for the sake of children and society. Firstly, although I don't know for sure, I can't be sure, I seriously doubt that Danny Kruger would argue that if you're beaten by your partner, you should stay with them regardless. And secondly, this doesn't take away from the broader point that we should be able to discuss the benefits of marriage without being accused of being far right or in some way bigoted of people who choose other ways of living. Marriage is, by and large, the best way to raise children. There are statistics to show that. And saying strong families are good for society does not make you a nutcase. Of course, that's not to say that people should be shamed or ostracised for being single parents. Of course, they shouldn't. But at the same time, marriage should be something that is encouraged and celebrated. Let's see what the shamed and shameless former Health Secretary Matt Hancock had to say.
Huge applause there for Danny Kruger. Your reaction?
It is so offensive and it's so wrong. I mean, tell that to the king. You know, he doesn't have a normative family and he is absolutely a strong basis for society. I mean, to make the argument that if you're in an abusive marriage, you must stick together for the sake of the kids, otherwise you're somehow undermining society.
Right, vomitorious, I would say. As if we should be taking lectures from Mr. Hancock when it comes to family and marriage. Perhaps it's hardly surprising that a man who cheated on his wife and walked out on his children would find Kruger's speech so offensive. It is not controversial to say that having two parents is the optimal way to raise a family, just like how it's not controversial to say that it's most beneficial to be born with 2 feet, 2 eyes and 2 arms. There we go. That's my palaver. Sorted, done, finished. Anyone got anything to say?
Yeah. I mean, I think the truth is that actually those kind of attitudes, when they prevailed far more strongly, did lead to a lot of people, if they were, for example, a woman being abused by their husband, feeling that they would be letting down expectations. When you say that that is the way that things have to be, you get people who get into terrible pickles, whether they romantically fall out or something far more serious as abuse, and they can't do that. And then at the same time, Danny Kruger, Prue Leith's son, off Bake Off, for those who don't know, he has also voted against and argued against gay people being able to have same-sex marriages. So he believes in marriage for people like him, but not for people like me. I actually think marriage is a really useful institution, so why is he against it? Are you against that?
I'm just so taken aback, although I'm not shocked, I'm not surprised really, that people seem to find it so offensive that someone would suggest that a mother and father is a beneficial way to live your life and to support children. Yes, there are other people who choose different ways of living and different ways of forming a family. But Leo, don't you think it's just so ridiculous, this strong backlash?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised in 2023. Something that would just be a normal thing to say 20 years ago is suddenly the most outrageously offensive far-right thing. And I mean, I don't agree with him on gay marriage. I mean, I think gay marriage should actually...
So many people voted against gay marriage, so he may have a different view now. We don't know. We don't know what he thinks.
I think gay marriage should actually be mandatory for you, Benjamin. I think it should be a punishment for you. But
what, do you mean a punishment for his potential partner, or for
that argument
Benjamin
doesn't
himself?
make any sense. There's a reason nobody calls you Leo Cursive, because that's completely broken up.
How many of these did you make up, Benjamin?
That was the fourth and final.
Did you pay somebody on Fiverr for these?
You're going to get rude after that one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a baby. I'm raising the baby with my wife, just like Hitler would do. So yeah, I mean, I think it's ridiculous that just having a baby and staying in a marriage can be seen as far right. I mean, I'm definitely going to stay.
And the reason why I say it can be seen as far right is because I'm not going to name any names, but I was accused of having views that belonged in 1930s and for being far right for saying that family is a good basis for a society to function.
Yes, that's what you said, and it was wrong of the person to call you a Nazi for that. But that's
well,
not
they didn't use the word Nazi.
That's not what Danny Kruger said. What Danny Kruger said was that a normative family is the only possible basis for a safe and functioning society. Only possible basis for a safe and functioning society. That is what is offensive, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people in this country who do not come from...
But as a basis,
Can I finish my point?
As a basis.
Can I finish my point? Who do not come from normative families, and to say that the only possible basis for a safe and functioning society is that you have the privilege of having two parents who are married, who stayed together, a privilege that I didn't have, that I wish I did have, is offensive. And actually, I think if the Conservatives want to package up 20th century social conservatism and sell it in the 21st century, it's not going to do very well in the ballot box.
I wonder, because you said that you wish not to go into your personal, background too much, but you did just say, I would have preferred to have had two married parents. Isn't that what he's saying, that it is the optimal thing?
He said only possible basis.
Basis, i.e., something to build upon, a society to build upon, the majority of people hopefully having that kind of, way of living. Is that a really, really controversial thing to say?
You just agreed with him, Alvin.
Do I sound bigoted by saying
I did not.
You did. You said I'd prefer to have had...
Of course it would have been my preference to have had my parents stay together, but clearly it's not the only possible basis to have a safe and functioning society, because here I am, functioning fine.
We know, and people have looked into this many times.
Viewers will judge that.
We know that, unfortunately, children from broken families are more likely to do worse at school and end up in crime. And this is not something that, means to say that every child who's from a broken family is going to end up that way. Of course not. But I think we should be encouraging people to stay together.
So it's not the only possible basis, is it?
But it is the best basis, it is the best foundation
of a society.
But of course it's not the only possible basis.
Which is why I disagree with
you. I'm reacting, that's fine, you disagree with Danny Kruger, that's fine, but I am reacting more to the ridiculous overreaction to his comments and the idea that family is something that we shouldn't, talk about positively.
Does it make Emily far right, Albie?
No, I think that's a nonsense comment, but equally I think it's completely reasonable for people to be offended by someone saying the only possible basis for a safe and functioning society are men and women to get married and have children.
I wonder if
it'll be 10 years since the Tories passed same-sex marriage, and I think it's disgusting that a Conservative MP is saying this in 2023.
First briefly, I think we look like a dysfunctional family. I hate the term broken family because some of those families are fixed by not being together.
No, fair enough. But still ahead, we're going to have to finish on that one. Still ahead, we lock horns. We're going to lock horns over Benjamin's view that we need far more houses on Britain's greenbelt. You won't want to miss it. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. It is time for our next and final debate. It's Benjamin, and he's going to tell us about why we should be building more houses on the greenbelt. Off you go, Benjamin.
Well, everyone's favourite part of the show. Good evening, boomers. You ruined this country. You benefited after the war from a booming economy, from millions of new homes, from an economy that was doing far better and getting richer. And yet now, as your lives are winding down, too many want to pull up the ladder from my generation. And nowhere is that more evident than in housing. Yes, I'm talking about the green belt. It keeps getting bigger. People think this is our beautiful, pleasant land. It's doubled in the last 20 or 30 years, from 6% of the country to 13%. Boomers are controlling where people can live, and it's meaning that house prices are out of reach for people like me. Now, even Keir Starmer and Michael Gove have found some agreement on this. Keir Starmer, I thought, was really brave this week when he said it's time to build on the green belt. You know, what I say is, what do we want? concrete, where do we want it? Lots more places. Because the truth is that we don't have enough houses in this country. You know, you have local councillors around Britain who are more scared to look at the greenbelt than Phillip Schofield is to look at his Twitter mentions. And that is why we need to change this. We need to have a situation where we stop thinking that the greenbelt cannot be built on. How much of this country do you think has housing on it? You're probably thinking 50, 60%. Let me tell you, it's not your time, Leo. It's 1.3% of the country has housing on it. It's tiny. The truth is that we need to rip up planning rules, we need to ignore the NIMBYs, those people that say, not in my backyard, and we need to start the diggers on building across Britain. Now, Leo, it's your turn.
Benjamin, why do you need a house? I mean, you're clearly happy with living in a skip. Also, the left have really changed. I mean, you used to be all about protecting the environment, and now you just want to concrete over all of it to accommodate all the people you want to bring into the country.
Well, I mean, you live rent-free in my head, judging by this evening. But look,
I'm not the one sitting at home making up nicknames for you.
Don't worry, I only sat here doing that. But, you know, the truth is that actually this myth that it is all beautiful countryside, that it's the Lake District or the Cotswolds, it's just nonsense. And actually, why should people like me have, you know, in London, it's like £500,000-600,000 for a small flat? We can't go on like this.
Why don't we build on brownfield sites instead? And the government, the state has got lots of unused buildings. There's lots of industrial areas that can be rejuvenated, and they're close to the facilities that houses actually need. Instead of building valuable environment.
Darren wants the airtime.
I do actually agree on the point of, you know, what's classified as greenbelt in some cases is insane, like a disused car wash, for example. But what I would say is, I think it's really actually quite offensive, and if I can sound like a snowflake for a moment, to the people that were paying double-digit interest rates for their mortgages, that worked pretty bloody damn hard, actually, to create a better life for themselves and to pass on to their children.
But they're not passing it on to their children.
Actually, they were struggling in the past. They went through what happened in the 1970s, because of your kind of economics.
Well, I won't have a Liz Truss supporter talking about that.
Well, you sound like Liz Truss, though, actually, Benjamin. She's all for ripping up all the planning regs.
But look, just to be clear...
Getting building.
I think so many people in this country, so many people of that generation, I'm not saying they didn't work hard and they didn't have to save.
You dismiss them
and
as
they didn't have discipline.
with contempt.
I know they did. You know, my late grandparents were buy-to-let landlords and they worked very hard for a moderate income. So I come from a background that has that. But they're not passing it on to their children because the market is warped. And the truth is the average rent this week outside of London went over £1,000 a month. So where are people meant to get the money to buy these houses? And I wouldn't mind if they weren't blocking house building. But in towns and cities across these country, people who moved into new builds 30, 40, 50 years ago won't let any new builds turn up.
Well, let's reduce immigration, Benjamin. That's the answer,
Darren, I think that's a really lazy point.
It is not.
And I will tell you why. I'll tell you why it's a lazy point. Because actually, even if we stopped immigration tomorrow and had net zero immigration, we would still have a massive housing shortage. Now,
of course, it wouldn't be making the problem worse.
Continue? I was about to say, but of course, continued mass migration just exacerbates the situation. But the point is, Benjamin is right. We need to be building more houses. And actually, there aren't enough brownfield sites to build all the houses that we need. So, yes, we will need to build in some greenfield areas. What I would propose is building around train stations that are in the greenbelt, which are just surrounded by fields.
Well, I think this is outrageous.
Why not do that?
Who needs fields? We get our food from Tesco's.
Forget building...
1.3% of the country is built upon.
Well, yeah, but forget building Jerusalem.
Fields.
That's an awful lot. No, the rest is countryside. The rest is fields, countryside, wilderness, whirling.
Actually, most of it's agriculture.
Fields.
You know, and lots of that isn't even used at the time. Lots of it is pretty rubbish land.
I think a lot of people will agree with me. I wish we didn't need to build this many houses.
If you do say so yourself.
But the fact that we do need to build so many houses means obviously we need to build on the greenbelt, because where else are people going to live? I mean, it's getting ridiculous. As you say, the rental prices, as you say, the house prices. We do need to build, and we need to build up as well.
Well, so instead of building Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land, we're going to build Birmingham en masse in England's green and pleasant land.
Yeah, I hope so.
What a damn disgrace.
So. No, I hope so, because what is the point in a country which can't house its own people? What is the point when you have a generation who can't afford, when they work all day, every day, to have a house? You know, we talk on this programme, we did last week in this channel a lot about people not having enough kids. It was a big theme of the National Conservatism conference you were at. Mate, they're not having kids because they can't afford a home to raise them in.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons.
One of the reasons, yeah, exactly.
And actually, do you know who spoke about housing in their National Conservatism speech? Danny Kruger, and I completely agreed with him. He actually spoke about He actually spoke about the need for there to be community trusts, which are almost owned by the people. It sounds a bit like a cooperative. Actually, this was being proposed by your chum, Danny Kruger, and I think he's absolutely right.
I just want to...
We need to come up with creative solutions to the housing shortage, and I'm glad that it's finally a topic that people are taking seriously.
I just want to quickly make the point I'm hosting Headliners tonight at 11 p.m, so tune in for that.
He is, yes. Now, folks, a fantastic show. I'm sure everyone agrees. It's been a spicy one.
It's been tiring.
Next up, though, it's going to be Mark Dolan. Thank you very much for watching and emailing in at home. Hopefully we'll see you again next week.
Hello there, welcome to your GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. I'm Craig Snell. Looking at the second half of the weekend for England and Wales, it's going to be another fine and dry day. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, we have this weather front which will gradually spread its way eastwards during the next 24 hours, giving a spell of rain here. But further south, the fine and dry conditions, all courtesy of an area of high pressure. So as we end Saturday, we end on a fairly clear note across England and Wales, but further north you can see this band of rain gradually spreading its way southeastwards across Scotland and Northern Ireland. The rain could turn briefly heavy, especially across the mountains of Scotland, but under the cloud and rain, no problems here with temperatures. Further south, it could turn quite chilly for the time of year, especially across some prone spots of the Midlands and Wales. But that really sets us up for another fine day across England and Wales. Could just see some low cloud from time to time, just affecting some eastern coasts, but really the cloudiest skies reserved for Scotland and Northern Ireland. The rain will weaken as we approach the afternoon. That may allow some brightness to develop, but on the whole, better the sunshine further south, where here we'll see temperatures reaching 21 or 22 degrees. Into the evening, the rain will continue to break up, so some late spells of sunshine possible across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But as we go through the course of the night, the clearest skies really across Wales and southwest England. So again, here could be another chilly night to come. The cloud remaining thickest across eastern Scotland, and as we approach Monday morning, again, we could still see some patchy outbreaks of rain. But for most on Monday, we do start the new working week on a fairly quiet note. Some good sunshine around, especially for western areas. Hopefully, it starts to improve as we go into the afternoon across eastern Scotland, and that really sets us up for a fairly quiet spell of weather for most of us as we go through the next few days. Tuesday and Wednesday look very similar, some good spells of sunshine, and in the sunshine, it should feel pleasantly warm out there.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to